Today I am making refried beans. I start with pinto beans. When I can find them, I like to buy the pre-washed. They were out of pre-wash, so I'm having to start with ones that need to be washed first. So my first step is to wash the beans very thoroughly, and then I'm going to soak them overnight in water, and then tomorrow I'll be cooking them in a slow cooker. My beans have soaked overnight, and before I put them in the water to cook, I like to rinse them one last time just to make sure I got everything that I could get off of it before I go and cook it. So I'm going to rinse it one more time. I've already placed some water in my crock pot, some filtered water of course, and now I'm just going to dump my beans in. It doesn't really matter, you want more water than beans. And now I'm just going to hit it on high, and when the water starts boiling, then I'll turn it back down to low, and then I'll let it cook for about 4 hours in the slow cooker. Okay, my beans have started to boil, not a vigorous boil, but good enough. And besides that, I have to leave for work, so I've turned down my dial to low, and it will just sit here and slow cook in my crock pot for about 4 hours. Unusually long day, so the beans cooked a little bit longer than 4 hours, but they're fine. It doesn't matter if they're a little bit mushy. It's just going to be easier to smash them up for my refried beans. Okay, I've drained all of the beans, but I leave, if you notice, I leave a little, just enough liquid to not quite cover the beans. If you drain all the liquid, it will just be too dry. And now I'm going to use my lovely stick blender, and I'm going to blend all of these beans until they're not quite smooth and creamy, but close. Okay, this looks pretty good. The texture is pretty good. And at this point, I like to add in a little bit of my salt. And of course, I always use the pink salt. If I'm going to use salt, I like a nutritional value to the salt. So I'm going to put, I don't know, about 3/4 teaspoon, and I'll taste it later when I'm cooking it to just make sure I've got enough salt in it. Refried beans are refried. So I start with about 50% lard and 50% bacon grease that I've collected from when I bake my bacon, which is a really clean bacon grease. I wait until the lard and the bacon grease are pretty hot. I don't know if you can see this in the video, but the surface is kind of shimmering a little bit, and a sure sign of how hot it is that it splatters when I put a little bit in. So now I'm going to pour all of my beans right on top of the grease, and I'm not even going to stir it. I'm going to just let it sit. I'm going to turn down my fire a little bit, and I'm going to let it sit here and cook for about 5 minutes, and then I'll stir it the first time. So this is a double batch, so I've actually added some more. This is an extra deep skillet that I'm refrying these in, and I think I may have actually added too many beans. I just was lazy and didn't want to have to do 2 batches. So I'm just going to make this work, which means being slow and ginger and not slopping my beans or my hot grease everywhere. But as you can see, I'm using a square-bottomed spatula, and what I'm literally doing is scraping along the bottom and scraping up the refried bean off the bottom. And in the meantime, I'm also mixing in this hot grease. Now, it'll mix in a lot faster since I went straight from making the beans to making the refried part, but a lot of times I simply don't have time, and so I'll make the beans and then I'll put them in the refrigerator, and then I'll come back and refry them. And when I do that, it takes a really long time to incorporate the lard into the beans, because the beans are cold, the lard is hot, and they they just don't want to agree with each other. The beans are water-based, the lard's obviously oil. So it's a real struggle when the beans are cold to get the lard mixed in properly. I am using a pretty big skillet to make these refried beans. And the thing is as they start cooking, these little plops are very hot. So I use a grease screen to protect myself, and sometimes if they get really strong, I'll even have to put a paper towel on top of this because somehow those plops will go right through my screen. As you can see, my refried beans are coming right along. This is normal now. As I stir it, it will actually spew up a little bit more, so I have to be real careful, and a lot of times I'll even hold my screen between my body and the pan just to make sure I'm not getting any splatter on myself. I've had to turn down the fire. The fire is on a higher level of low. I have it on 3, and I'm stirring now. Mostly my motion here is that I'm scraping the refried bean off the bottom. That's where my flavor is, and I'm stirring it around. My lard and my bacon grease have pretty much mixed completely into the pot, and so now I'm just going around and I'm unsticking anything that I feel stuck to the bottom of the pot, and that's what I'll do for a couple more times. You can tell it's starting to look really done. There's a sort of a, I don't know, a pudding look that it gets on the top whenever the beans start really getting closer to being done. Alright, my beans are done, and when I take off the screen you can see the texture on the very top, and when I mix it, this final mix, there's a nice thick, nice glop there. There's a nice thick coating of fried beans on the very bottom. I've already turned off my burner, but there's just so much heat in here, it's plopping, and I have to be really careful because it will definitely give me blistering burns if it plops onto my skin. So my next step is I'm going to stir this one last time, make sure I have all the coating, the refried beans that are on the bottom of the pan. I'm going to scrape them all off. Then I'm going to let it cool a little bit so I can work with it, and then I've got to bottle it, and then I'll put it in the refrigerator. It will keep for about 2, maybe 3 weeks in the refrigerator. It's preservative free. I know everything that's in here, and it will taste delicious. Believe me, once you've tried homemade refried beans, you'll never go back to canned. My beans have cooled enough that I'm going to start putting them in my jars. I've bought these little mason jars, and I've used them for virtually everything, and this is going to be really hot, but I'll spin it all in, and before it cools I'll put the lid on and not tighten it as tight as it will go, but tighten it down and seal it just like you would if you were canning some fruit or vegetable and you started by getting it hot to keep the germs out. So I fill it as full as I can to keep as little air out as possible. Can you see that? Alright, this is really hot. And there you have it. Refried beans, homemade and delicious.